My name is Big Hartman. I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel at the State of Vermont Human Rights Commission. I want to thank you all for joining us today. It is Human Rights Day. We're gonna go through this event by I'll start us off with some opening remarks, and then I'll be inviting some of the human rights advocates that are here in the room today to speak about the impact and importance of our agency. So here we are. Today is December 10th, and this is a day that nations, states, and organizations across the world are recognizing Human Rights Day. This is a date that commemorates the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was passed by the United Nations 76 years ago today on December 10th, 1948. State of Vermont Human Rights Commission is an independent state agency created by statute in 1987. The HRC's primary role is to enforce the Vermont Fair Housing and Public Accommodations Act. We also handle claims made by state employees under Vermont's Fair Employment Practices Act. Enforcement of anti-discrimination laws entails complaint processing, thorough investigations, facilitating resolution of claims, and litigation in court. Our staff also work to provide education and outreach to the public about rights and responsibilities under these important anti-discrimination laws. Today, the Vermont Human Rights Commission is at a critical juncture. Our investigative staffing level has remained stagnant for decades, but the demands upon our office have only increased. For the past year, our office has been inundated with new requests for discrimination complaint investigations. Most of these claims are made by our most marginalized and vulnerable community members, people facing housing insecurity, people with disabilities, people of color, the elderly, and parents of queer, trans, and BIPOC students. The cases that we are able to accept often languish, sometimes taking a year, 2 years, or even longer for closure. All too often lately, we must make the impossible decision to decline new cases for investigation simply because we are beyond capacity. Vermont's housing crisis is leaving many vulnerable and suffering, which we believe has contributed to a significant rise in housing discrimination cases. While we're accepting and processing more cases than ever in HRC history, the fact remains that our current staffing levels severely limit how much we can do. To meet the demands for fair housing associated with the current crisis in housing, we must expand our resources to ensure that everyone who has experienced housing discrimination can access our services. Individuals with disabilities also continue to face significant barriers and discrimination in housing, employment, and places of public accommodation. We've seen an increase in disability-related cases, reflecting both the persistence of these issues and the growing trust in our commission's work. While we are fully committed to working to ensure justice for those impacted, our current capacity limits how fully we can respond. To better serve Vermont's most marginalized populations, we need to enhance our ability to provide trauma-informed, inclusive support. Finally, I want to speak to the growing number of new and very disturbing reports I have received in the past 6 months involving students of color, students with disabilities, and queer and trans students who are facing disability at school. Based on the trends I'm seeing, I'm very concerned that the discrimination and harassment investigations involving Vermont students are likely to increase both in seriousness and in quantity. These cases are laden with trauma and other complexities, leading to delays in processing those investigations. Without additional resources, we risk falling behind, leaving these cases unresolved for too long, and the people depending on us waiting in uncertainty and distress. Vermont's anti-discrimination protections are essential to ensuring that all people in Vermont have dignity, respect, and equity in all the major aspects of their life, at work, in public places, and in their housing. I want to now open up the conversation to hear from some of Vermont's community leaders about these issues. So I'm going to start with Michelle Olvera from the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Big, for inviting us to come and share this day and mark this important day with you. And also really for the opportunity to give voice to our support for your incredible work and vital work investigating, resolving discrimination, and as I've just heard, so much more, including education. I think it's clear that it's not just us that support the Human Rights Commission. So many Vermonters are reaching out to try to resolve their complaints of discrimination. And I believe that, the state of Vermont should be applauding and supporting that very positive need and want from Vermonters themselves. But underfunding the Human Rights Commission to the extent where people may have to wait 2 years to resolve those complaints is not supporting the vital work of the Human Rights Commission. And I say that it's not just that we're addressing the discrimination, but I think it's for the resolution and the healing that it brings to parties that can resolve their claims of discrimination. And that in turn brings that resolution and that healing to our communities all over Vermont. So I just really want to thank you for your work and tell you that we wholeheartedly support what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Next, I'm going to call upon Ornella Metaf-Briguero from the Land Access and Opportunity Board. Thank you, Ornella, for joining us today.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Big, for hosting this space, and thank you all for being here and for your attention and your presence today. I'm here to support a fully funded Human Rights Commission. I see the human rights tasks and roles within our state, a very important one. One of the roles I see is that they're a mechanism by which the state enforces justice, accountability of all of these critical anti-discrimination laws and human rights laws. They encourage, ask, and support institutions as they develop programs and policies to support Vermonters. And that promotes ongoing quality improvement in many of our institutions, and is the only way that I'm seeing sometimes that ongoing quality improvement can happen. This independent state body has unfortunately been consistently underfunded, limiting access from our most vulnerable communities have to care, justice, and ongoing accountability. At this point, I am going to tentatively use the word negligent to describe the choice of continuing to underfund this important body. Negligent because it would continue to deteriorate the faith that our most marginalized Vermonters have in their public institutions and agencies. I thank you all for your attention to this matter, and I hope that you too can see the value and need for a fully resourced Human Rights Commission in our state for all of our Vermonters.
Thank you so much, Ornella. Next, I'm going to call upon Mark Hughes from the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you as well, Big, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all of you who've joined. I am shaken today as I sit here and just contemplate the gravity of where we are as a state, as we speak about what we understand to be civil rights, but what we know to be human rights, and how they are protected here. Again, I'm shaken as I think about just how it is necessary, why it is necessary that we should even have to be here at this moment, at this time, as we are crossing this juncture of the arc of history in the movement for civil rights in the United States, and the trajectory that we know that we're on as a nation heading into this next year, that we would have to be here having a conversation about whether or not we're going to fund an apparatus that protects the human rights of the people of Vermont. It's disturbing. It's to me, it's something that I'm just having a difficult time with personally right now as I'm sitting in this space. As we move into this next year, is my hope, with the proliferation of what we know to alleged discriminatory practices across housing, public accommodations, and yes, even fair employment. This is not a nice to have or a good thing to put on the wish list, but I think this should be something that's just baseline in as we move forward. So I think the audience is the legislature. I think it's the executive, and I think it's also the folks who are doing the work across the state of Vermont to protect the folks who can't protect themselves. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Mark. Next, I'd like to hear from Matt Shagum at the Vermont Legal Aid. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thank you very much, Big, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm a staff attorney with Vermont Legal Aid. I am fortunately half located in the disability law program and in the housing discrimination law program. So I have the benefit of working with the HRC on perhaps the full spectrum of what it provides Vermont citizens in terms of redress and access to justice. One thing I want to point out is I don't know that many people realize just how huge the scope of practice the HRC has. It's not just housing discrimination, it's disability discrimination or discrimination of any kind for state employees. It handles investigations into public accommodations for every business in the state of Vermont. It covers discrimination which occurs in our schools and our learning institutions. And there virtually is no other organization, perhaps my own, I'm proud to say, but that provides this level of recourse and has this kind of scope for providing Vermonters access to their homes, to their businesses, to their workplaces, to their schools. And I have had the pleasure of working in private practice before coming to VLA, and I can say with some certitude there is virtually nothing available to the average Vermonter which is in any way, shape, or form affordable in terms of even basic access to an attorney to tell you whether or not your rights have been violated. The HRC is a major cornerstone of our rights in making sure that there is at least somebody who can pick up the phone, hear what has happened to you, give you a basic investigation of the facts and a reasonable grounds that you know what has or has not actually occurred in your life. So an absolutely invaluable organization covering the entire spectrum just about of our civil society, and the funding is just not appropriate. The level funding, which has occurred for years, has resulted in significant delays in investigations. And what I want to say is, I believe the HRC is working very hard. I've seen tremendous improvement in time frames in the last few years as the HRC responds to these. It's resulted in a narrowing of investigations. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but it's necessary, and it shows the HRC cares and is working very, very hard to try and get as much efficiency out of it as it can. We are all seeing a lot of headwinds. I think there's a lot of political, shall we say, uncertainty at this moment in time. And what we are concerned about here at VLA is that we are hearing there's a lot of talk about what may or may not happen in terms of support for other organizations. And that includes ours. We are hoping for the best, and we will continue to do whatever we can, but that makes the HRC all the more important because it is a state organization. Its funding is in Vermonters' hands and nobody else's. It is our choice whether or not we choose to provide this service to ourselves. And I can certainly absolutely say that appropriately funded, Vermonters are in great hands. If we continue to let things languish, it will be a continued insult to ourselves and our ability to claim that we have a state that provides access to justice for all of its citizens when their rights are curtailed, infringed, denied, all of those words that say somebody is being treated unjustly. And I hope the legislature understands the importance that the HRC plays in all of these systems in holding every institution accountable, not just private landlords, but municipalities and the state itself. There is no question that the HRC is a necessary element to be able to bring accountability and effective governance at all levels to this state. And I think I'll get off my soapbox and simply urge everybody to continue to support the HRC in any way that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to hear from Jess Hyman from Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. Thank you so much for joining us, Jess.
Thank you, Big. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate Human Rights Day with all of you and the opportunity to advocate for the Human Rights Commission and all the people that you serve. So our statewide housing advocacy programs here at CVOEO provide education support, technical assistance, and referrals to thousands of renters, mobile home residents, and others from around Vermont each year. And these services are grounded in the knowledge that housing is a basic human right and that everyone deserves a safe place to call home. And the Human Rights Commission is a key partner in this work. We regularly refer people to the HRC to file fair housing complaints when they're denied housing, when they're being harassed or treated unfairly, simply because they have a disability, young children, are BIPOC or LGBTQ+, or are members of other protected classes. We often consult with Commission staff on fair housing issues, and we partner with the Commission for annual Fair Housing Month events and other community-based activities to promote inclusive, affordable housing. As Big mentioned, as Vermont's housing crisis has deepened, we've seen a significant increase in people being treated unfairly as they seek to rent, buy, finance, or simply live in their homes. And we really depend on the Human Rights Commission, and it's clear that the need for addressing these fair housing complaints far exceeds their current capacity. The high volume of cases and growing backlog means that it takes the existing skilled and dedicated staff a long time to process these intakes and investigate cases. And when we can't address these issues of basic rights violations in a timely manner, it not only reduces the ability to enforce the existing law, but it erodes confidence in the system. And it makes it less likely that people are going to report these issues, and this can reinforce these systems of exclusion and unfair treatment. So in this housing market that we have, where there simply aren't enough homes and what's available isn't affordable for most residents, illegal discrimination is happening more and more and more. And it's often the most vulnerable in our communities who suffer. So if and when the Human Rights Commission and other enforcement partners have more capacity and can address these issues more swiftly, then we can provide more justice for Vermonters, for vulnerable Vermonters. We can make it easier for people, no matter who they are, where they come from, who they love, to have equal access to choice in where they live. And we can better ensure that everyone has the ability to access and be in their homes free from discrimination or harassment. So we're so grateful for the work that the Human Rights Commission does and for their partnership, and we enthusiastically support increased funding for this critical agency so that you can meet the need that's out there.
Thank you so much, Jess. Next, we're joined by Susan Aronoff from the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. Thank you so much for joining us, Susan. It's nice to see you.
Sure. Nice to see you, Big. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for recognizing Human Rights Day. That's just so important. So for folks who don't know, the largest number of complaints in public accommodation discrimination that the Human Rights Commission receives every year are from people with disabilities. And it is just so important that there is a there. For people with disabilities in Vermont, just going to a local co-op can mean like no access. Like the grooviest of the groovy places, they seem to just not get it about basic accessibility. And it's not just shopping in areas, really vital areas like healthcare. People with disabilities are the largest group of people who experience health disparities in the state. And again, a lot of times it's just basic access. The stories of families who are told when they have a family member who uses a wheelchair, no, we can't get your family members' basic weight or measurements here. They've been told things literally like, maybe you can go to the veterinarian's office because they have in-floor scales, and on it goes. So for Vermonters with disabilities, and I work for the Developmental Disabilities Council, every state has one where we exist to support Vermonters with disabilities and their family members in accessing everywhere where people live, work, learn, and play. And the people I work for a council made up of a majority of people with disabilities and their family members. And I hear daily, how hard it is to get a hotel room, to eat in a restaurant. And to do anything in Vermont. And if we didn't have the Human Rights Commission and Vermont Legal Aid's Disability Law Project available as tools, I just don't know what I would tell people. There has to be a there. It can't be a situation where there's no help coming. Our students with disabilities, rafts of them, scores of them, received letters at the start of the school year telling them that their services that they need, that they're entitled to by law, would not be provided. And if we don't have the legal agents like Legal Aid, and I'm looking at you, Kelly, and Matthew, and the folks at the Human Rights Commission, then all these great laws people fought for, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, they're meaningless if they can't be enforced. So thank you for everything you do for enforcement, and onward. Maybe this year we'll get our constitutional amendment. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan. Our final speaker for today is Mia Schultz, who's joining us today from the NAACP. Thank you so much, Mia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for putting this all together on Human Rights Day, a monumental day where we reflect the critical importance of ensuring justice and equity for all Vermonters. And as we underscore the indispensable role of the Vermont Human Rights Commission in addressing discrimination across various spheres of life. As an organization deeply committed to civil rights, the Rutland Area NAACP frequently refers a wide range of cases to the Vermont Human Rights Commission. These cases span from issues of housing and public accommodations. However, one area consistently stands out as the most prevalent in the referrals that we make, and that's in education, as Big mentioned at the beginning of this session or of this press conference. Our schools should be safe havens where all students have the opportunity to learn, grow, and reach their full potential. Yet too many students face discriminatory practices, inequitable treatment, and systemic barriers that undermine their educational experiences. From exclusionary discipline policies to a lack of cultural inclusivity, these challenges disproportionately impact students of color and other marginalized groups, and we see the devastating consequences in the referrals that we make to the HRC. And the HRC serves as that vital avenue for addressing these injustices, and its ability to take on new cases increasingly constrained by its limited resources, which is why we're here today, to really uplift the work that they're doing with so little, with only 7 team members managing a growing backlog of cases, which we've talked about often, Big and I and Amanda and the folks in the office, and how the commission is often forced to delay or decline critical investigations. And this only delays the justice that comes to our kids, to our communities, and exacerbates the harm for the very people and families that it's meant to protect. We really, really urge our community and our state leaders to prioritize increased funding and support the Vermont Human Rights Commission and invest in their capacity, not just as an investment in resolving cases more efficiently, but investment in our future of our children, in the integrity of our educational institutions, and the promise of justice for all Vermonters. So on this Human Rights Day, let us recommit to ensuring that every child, every family, and every individual in Vermont has equal access to justice, equity, and opportunity. And together we can strengthen the institutions that safeguard these rights and build a more inclusive and equitable state for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mia. I'm really moved and touched to hear so many of you speak about the importance of the Human Rights Commission. I know our small staff of 7 people is giving this work everything we've got. I'm just going to close by I want to share with you all a document, a report that we created to kind of highlight what we are asking for and why. So I'm going to share in the chat a link to a report, a 4-page report that we've created recently that is summarizing some of the issues that we're grappling with and what we're asking for as we try to face what is ahead as responsibly and comprehensively as possible. And I'm gonna hopefully the technology will cooperate, so I can just review this briefly with you. And it is available on our website for you to look at in more detail. On our first page of this report, we're just outlining the general need for more robust human rights enforcement in Vermont. What you can see from the chart there is that we've had an increased capacity to close cases, and we have accepted almost 40% more cases than last year in the fiscal year that just ended in July. So as compared fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, you can see that we were able to close significantly more cases, and we also opened significantly more cases. Mostly we felt no other option but to accept more cases in light of the demand that we've been experiencing. And in order to address that effectively, I felt it was important that we streamline our investigative report writing process so that we would be able to close out more cases. And we are seeing that quickly have an impact on the number of case closures so far in both fiscal year 24, towards the second half of that year, and now we're in fiscal year 25. So Amanda, if you could just scroll down. I'm not going to read this word for word, but just to give you an overview of what we're talking about. The next page is an overview of kind of what is our current caseload. And this is as of December 1st. I will say these numbers have shifted in just the last 10 days as we have new cases coming in every day. And what I want you to know is that with the small team of 7, right now, we have more active cases than ever in HRC history, and I think it's by a long shot. Currently, we have 68 active investigations and cases that investigations have finished, and now we're in a conciliation phase because they have gone reasonable grounds. We have 15 cases that we have filed lawsuits on in court, thanks to having a full-time litigator on staff as of last year. And this year, just in fiscal year 25 so far, we've accepted 42 new cases. I will tell you that number has gone up since December 10th. And we expect to double fiscal year 23's number by the end of fiscal year 25. We've also closed out more cases than ever in kind of record speed to just try to keep up with the pace of new complaints. But it just is not enough. And the reason we know it's not enough is because of the next number you see on this chart, that there's 102 people whose cases are in an inquiry phase. They haven't made it through intake. Sometimes our intake process is taking 3 to 6 months for us to be able to get the information we need to know whether we can accept a complaint or not. And that is just too long for anyone to find out whether or not there's even going to be an HRC investigation. We're working as quickly as we can to schedule folks for intake meetings. Sometimes we're able to do that in a few weeks. More often it takes a few months to have time in our calendars to do that because we don't have a full-time position dedicated to conducting intake. We have to share that between staff, and it's just too many people with not enough staff. So we have been able to hold 50 intake meetings so far in this fiscal year. That's an estimate, and I can say for sure I've had to decline for almost 50 people this year. That number 47, I know it's gone up since since December 1st. That's cases that folks would like to have a complaint investigated with us, and we tell them we are not taking their investigation. Those folks are generally going to be left without recourse. There are not a lot of attorneys who are going to take a case to court without the benefit of a Human Rights Commission investigation already completed. And I wanted to share for you on the right side of this page, you can see our current staffing levels. With only 3 investigators working on all of these cases statewide, we just cannot get the work done, and the backlog just keeps building. The third page is to kind of highlight how the successes that we've had, that as the legislature has created some new capacity for us to do litigation, for example, and to do more outreach and policy work, that we're seeing significant impact from those efforts. And also across the bottom of the page, you'll see some new innovations we've undertaken this year to try to improve the efficiencies in our processes so that we can process cases more quickly. But as it says there, these changes, while increasing our impact, are not enough to meet the demands of today. And so our last page on this report is the summary of what are the new positions that we're asking for. We're asking for 6 new positions, and those are full-time positions and 2 part-time positions. These have been really well thought out about how to address a lot of the gaps we see and the things that contribute to delays in our process. I encourage you all to take a closer look at this, and this is kind of what I'm able to think about most of the time, is how much more work we could accomplish and how many more people we could serve if we were able to, if we had the capacity that we're envisioning with this proposal. And I just want to close out my part of the presentation here today to call upon our statewide leaders, our legislators, the administration, and anyone with a voice to say, please lend your support to our agency being able to fulfill our mission of advancing full civil and human rights in Vermont. Thank you.